Calm before the storm. The small town of Ashbury, Massachusetts, seemed untouched by the world's chaos. Its leafy streets framed by meticulously maintained lawns and ivy-covered mailboxes. The subtle hum of distant traffic blended with birdsong, and the occasional laughter of children playing along the sidewalks. To an outsider, this was the picture of suburban tranquility, a place where secrets had no business lingering. Emily Harper had lived in this peaceful community for nearly a decade, breathing in its rhythm until it shaped the contours of her own life. Her days revolved around a steady routine. Early morning runs through the crisp New England air, a quick breakfast at the kitchen island with her husband Daniel, then a short drive to her job as a data analyst at a local tech company. Emily was known for her sharp mind and reliability at work, yet she was most comfortable in silence, content with observing more than speaking. Her husband, Daniel Harper, was the kind of man who seemed tailor-made for their perfect neighborhood. Well-dressed, polite, and moving confidently through life, Daniel had recently been promoted to middle management at a burgeoning logistics firm in Boston. His charm made him popular both at work and in the neighborhood, but no one knew him quite like Emily did. His moments of quiet anxiety, the rare flashes of vulnerability beneath the glossy veneer. Their marriage, on the surface, was enviable. Neighbors often saw the two together at weekend barbecues or hosting small dinner parties. The Harpers' modest colonial-style house white siding, trimmed with navy blue, regularly echoed with the warmth of lively conversation and the clink of wine glasses. No one visited the Harper home more than Olivia Moore. A lifelong friend of Emily's, since their college days in Boston, Olivia was an ever-present fixture in their lives. She radiated energy. Her witty banter and infectious laugh seemed to fill every room she entered. Olivia wasn't married, but her successful career in public relations made her a regular at social events, and she was always ready with a story or a sympathetic ear. To Emily, Olivia was more than a friend, she was family, someone she trusted implicitly. The two shared inside jokes, traded advice about work and life, and spent countless evenings sharing wine and memories. Daniel got along well with Olivia, and the three often spent time together, whether relaxing on the patio on warm summer nights or watching old movies inside on rainy afternoons. Despite the seeming perfection that wrapped itself like a shield around their lives, a faint sense of restlessness had begun to gnaw at Emily. At first, it was nothing more than a flicker, a casual remark of Daniel's that didn't quite make sense, a fleeting glance between him and Olivia she couldn't quite place. Emily pushed such thoughts aside, reasoning that all close relationships carried their share of ambiguities. But the uneasiness persisted. She caught herself recalling moments when she felt like an outsider, standing in her own kitchen, a half-heard whisper between Daniel and Olivia, a pause in conversation when she entered the room, the faint scent of Olivia's perfume lingering on Daniel's jacket after she'd left for the night. These were small things, easily explained away, but once noticed, they became difficult to ignore. The chapter closes as Emily stands alone in the fading light of her living room, looking out across the immaculate lawn, her face reflected faintly in the polished glass. The world outside is calm, but beneath that surface, the first ripples of an approaching storm are beginning to form, ripples that Emily, so attuned to details, cannot help but feel. The naked truth. The early morning sun streamed in through slats in the blinds, scattering pale stripes across the kitchen floor. Emily sipped her coffee, gazing absent-mindedly at the steam curling from the surface. The rhythmic clatter of Daniel preparing his briefcase, the soft chiming of Olivia's text on her phone, these were the sounds that made up Emily's mornings. They were sounds she trusted, familiar as her own breathing, until now. It happened on a Thursday, an ordinary day cloaked in routine, when the ground quietly shifted beneath her. Emily was home from work early. She expected to find the house empty. Instead, muffled voices drifted down the hall from the living room, the one room she hadn't planned to enter. She stood, frozen, for a moment before the words began to take shape. "She'll never know," Olivia whispered, her voice carrying a tremor that didn't quite sound like her usual confidence. Emily's heart thudded sharply in her chest. There was a hush, then Daniel's familiar voice, oddly strained. "It's risky, Liv. We need to be careful." A prickle ran down Emily's spine. She should have left, made a noise, stumbled in clumsily with apologies for her early arrival, but she remained still. Through a narrow crack in the doorway, she saw the way Daniel's hand reached for Olivia's, how they sat pressed close together on the couch, conspiratorial. Olivia's painted nails brushed Daniel's sleeve. Their laughter low, intimate told Emily everything spoken words could not. The moment was surreal, as though she were standing outside herself, observing instead of living. Her mind scrambled for excuses, for logical explanations that might neutralize the acid rising in her throat. Maybe she misunderstood. Maybe it was a mistake, a mirage conjured by fatigue and suspicion. But the evidence piled up in quick, dizzying succession. The secretive glances, the sudden urgency in Olivia's voice, the way Daniel flinched when Emily's footsteps finally entered the hallway. The air in the room felt charged, brittle. All three of them exchanged words, but only Emily heard the discordant undertones. Olivia smiled too widely, voice pitched just a little too high. Daniel fussed with his tie, fumbling over explanations for why he was home so early himself. By the evening, after both Daniel and Olivia had left, Emily let the initial shock roll over her in waves. She wandered the silent house, fingers drifting absently over the cold marble countertop, the framed wedding photos lining the staircase, the half-burned candle on the windowsill she'd lit just for the scent of cinnamon and home. A silent reel played in her mind. Old memories of friendship and laughter with Olivia, Daniel's promises, the hundreds of small acts that once felt like trust. But trust now felt paper-thin. That night, lying beside Daniel in the dark, Emily heard every shift of fabric, every sigh. She stared at the ceiling, mind racing, body rigid. The temptation was there to confront him, to scream, to demand an explanation until the thin night air split apart. Instead, she lay silent, her heartbeat slower than her thoughts, her breath measured out in deliberate, careful counts. She remembered Olivia's secrets, the idle confessions over endless bottles of wine, whispered vulnerabilities, professional weaknesses, and personal failings shared in the intimacy of their friendship. Every word took on new sharpness, each secret potentially another weapon. And yet, beneath the sharpened edge of betrayal, Emily's mind moved with chilling clarity. As pain settled into a steady ache, she found herself unable to cry, every tear stopped at its source by a growing cold determination. She did not want chaos or violent scenes. She merely wanted control, a silent, methodical recentering of the world that had toppled around her. By morning, Emily drew on her rehearsed smile and slipped on the mask of normalcy, sharper than ever. She said nothing, not to Daniel, not to Olivia. No accusations, no scenes, not yet. The world outside went on as if nothing had shifted, but Emily knew, behind closed doors, nothing would be the same again. The burked truth, now uncloaked, lay between her and the people she loved most, raw and unyielding. Emily would protect herself, but she would do it quietly, step by calculated step. The first move had already been made, even if neither Daniel nor Olivia realized it yet. The blueprint. The days that followed moved with deceptive normalcy. For all the world could see, Emily was the epitome of composure, clocking in at work, exchanging polite smiles with neighbors, sharing witty remarks at book club meetings, and posting carefully chosen photos of weekend brunches to her social media. But behind the mask, something formidable was taking shape, a quiet machine, fueled by pain and precise calculation. Emily was well acquainted with structure and patterns. As a data analyst, her mind instinctively searched for connections, weaknesses, and anomalies. Now, this professional skill became a matter of self-preservation. Every night, in the hush of her study lit only by a small desk lamp, she laid out her thoughts in bullet point lists, timelines, and digital folders password-protected from prying eyes. The evidence hushed conversations, text messages she'd seen over Daniel's shoulder. The unexplained receipts tucked into his wallet began to form a web, each strand more incriminating than the last. It was not just Daniel's habits she examined, but Olivia's as well. Years of friendship had yielded a trove of knowledge. Olivia's insecurities about her career, the rival at her PR firm she'd privately loathed, her embarrassing professional missteps, fleeting affairs that had never made it into the daylight, the anxiety bubbling beneath her bright exterior. Emily remembered every conversation over wine, every whispered exchange during late-night walks, every nervous confession about clients and colleagues. Occasionally, guilt threatened to flicker through Emily's resolve. Images of happier times, road trips and birthdays, marathon phone calls, hospital visits, after Olivia's surgery would surface, bringing with them a pang of sorrow for the friendship that once was. But then the memory of Daniel's hand on Olivia's, the soft urgency in Olivia's voice, would rise to drown out her hesitation. Emily would exhale, gather herself, and return to her quiet work. She became a master of observation, making mental notes of patterns and vulnerabilities. When Olivia tended to overshare on social media, how Daniel's work emails were too easily left open on the family laptop, the way Olivia bristled at the mention of a certain demanding client. Emily listened for cracks in their stories, watched for lies disguised as inside jokes, and catalogued every inconsistency. On evenings when the ache of betrayal settled heavy on her chest, Emily would revisit her plan, dispassionate and disciplined. She mapped out contingencies, anticipating Daniel's denials, Olivia's deflections, even the possible reactions of their close-knit friends. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming control in a world that had been spun off its axis. Small, strategic steps became Emily's new normal. Without arousing suspicion, she began asking more pointed questions, testing the boundaries of Olivia's trust, quietly checking in with acquaintances who moved within Daniel's professional orbit. She cultivated an air of softness and vulnerability to those closest to her, prompting them to dismiss her as naive, incapable of calculated malice. It was exactly what she wanted. Soon, Emily's digital files swelled with screenshots, voice memos, secondhand gossip distilled to cold, hard facts. She dedicated herself to learning the legal boundaries of privacy and professional ethics, ensuring every move she made could not be traced back or called truly illegal. She wanted to walk the razor's edge, never stumbling into the role of a criminal, only that of a witness who, by chance, happened to know where the skeletons were buried. Yet, through it all, Emily's outward demeanor never wavered. She was still the doting wife and loyal friend, inviting Olivia over for dinner, congratulating Daniel on his minor successes, volunteering for a neighborhood fundraiser, even making jokes at her own expense. Her voice remained even, her eyes warm, every detail perfectly calibrated. As autumn set in and the evenings grew longer, Emily felt her determination solidify into something cold and immutable. This, she realized, was not just about retribution. It was about restoring her own sense of order, proving she would not be the casualty of their secrecy. Every secret they had shared with her, every careless moment of trust, had unknowingly handed her the keys to their unraveling. By the third week, the plan was perfected, silent, subtle, a masterpiece of patience and restraint. Emily knew her time would come. Until then, she would wait in the shadows she knew so well, collecting every necessary piece, every loose thread, every overlooked truth. For the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of power bloom quietly in her chest. And so, the blueprint was drawn. All that remained was execution. The game begins. Emily had always believed true power wasn't about grand gestures. It lay in the subtle, the invisible, in nudges so slight they could be mistaken for coincidence or fate. It was a lesson she'd learned with every spreadsheet, each time a complex problem at work revealed its solution not with fireworks, but quiet, incremental logic. Now, she channeled that same patience into her hidden war. She started with Olivia. By all appearances, nothing changed between them. If anything, Emily was warmer, more attentive, inviting Olivia over for coffee and lending a sympathetic ear when her friend vented about work drama. Behind her friendly smile, Emily was quietly taking stock, cataloging Olivia's moods, her schedule, and, most importantly, her vulnerabilities. One late afternoon, Emily suggested Olivia join her at the new cafe in town, a place popular with local business owners and frequented by several of Olivia's clients. Emily was careful to choose a table near the window, in full view of the afternoon crowd. With practiced casualness, she steered the conversation to Olivia's firm, raising topics that subtly highlighted her recent professional failures, hinting at concerns clients might have voiced, though, of course, Emily never said where she heard things. Olivia laughed off most of it, but the uncertainty in her eyes didn't go unnoticed. That evening, Emily crafted a carefully worded, anonymous tip sent from a fake email account to the HR department at Olivia's PR agency. The message referenced the very concerns Emily had seeded during their cafe conversation. Olivia's questionable client relationships, a rumor about missed deadlines, the possibility of improper disclosures during pitch meetings. It was enough to raise suspicion, but vague enough to protect Emily from any fallout. The next target was Daniel. Emily knew her husband's office routine nearly as well as her own. She waited for the morning when he left his work laptop briefly unattended at the kitchen counter. In less than 3 minutes, she copied a handful of files, emails between Daniel and a few of his company's competitors, exchanges that skirted close to corporate policy but, by themselves, weren't incriminating. On their own, the emails meant nothing. But out of context and in the hands of the right person, they could spark an investigation. Emily opened a new, encrypted email account. Late that night, she sent the copied files and a short, cryptic message to Daniel's supervisor, posing as a concerned coworker. She attached just enough evidence to raise uncomfortable questions, nothing that could directly trace back to her. Then she deleted every trace of the interaction, clearing the browser's history, shredding the temporary files, double-checking her personal devices. Several days later, Olivia called, her voice strained with forced cheer. "Emily, you wouldn't believe the shitstorm at work. Someone's been spreading rumors about me now. They're poking through my emails from 3 years ago. It's insane. Have you heard anything?" Emily poured just enough sympathy into her voice. "Oh, Liv, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? You know how jealous people get when someone's good at their job. I'm sure it'll blow over." She added just a twinge of incredulity, as if the idea of Olivia under real suspicion was unthinkable. Meanwhile, Daniel grew irritable, distracted at home, spending long hours fielding calls and sending texts punctuated with anxious sighs. Emily watched him with quiet fascination, her interest clinical, almost cold. When she pressed gently, Daniel dismissed his worries as office drama. Emily just nodded, offering supportive words and soft touches, playing the role of model wife. Social circles, too, became Emily's board. She let slip choice tidbits during a book club meeting at their neighbor's house. "Isn't it wild how hard PR is these days? The news never sleeps. I guess you have to watch every word you say." She spoke with genuine concern, never mentioning Olivia directly, but in a group that included a parent from the local school board and a realtor who'd worked with Olivia's firm on a recent campaign. The ripple effect was subtle, almost imperceptible. Emily also exchanged messages with a few acquaintances in Daniel's field, couched as friendly curiosity. She asked general questions about his company's competitors, joked about tight deadlines, and the ever-watchful eyes of management. She weaved her words so no one could accuse her of gossiping, merely a wife supporting her husband's success. But Emily knew how information flowed in tight-knit communities. A whisper at just the right moment could grow into persistent, damaging chatter. At night, Emily reviewed what she'd set in motion. There was never satisfaction, never a smile, never a sense of triumph. Instead, she felt a cold, trembling energy, a vigilance that filled the spaces where trust and tenderness had once lived. She reread every message for excess emotion, every social post for a word out of place. Perfection, she reminded herself, was her shield. One reckless move could unravel everything. Olivia, usually effervescent, grew restless and distracted. She changed her hair twice in 2 weeks. First auburn, then a startling ash blonde, telling Emily too many times that she just wanted something fresh. When they met for coffee the next Friday, Olivia's hands shook as she stirred her latte. Her smile was brittle. "You ever feel like everyone's watching you?" she asked. "Like you could say one wrong word and your whole life could change?" Emily reached across the table. "Hey, no one knows you like I do. You're bulletproof, Liv. This is just a bad week." Her own words tasted like iron. If Daniel noticed any pattern, he did not show it. He paced the house, started keeping his phone locked at all times. Some nights Emily would hear him on the porch, on a hushed call, tone tense and clipped. She watched him through the kitchen window, the same man she'd once known so well, now a stranger in familiar clothes. Emily was careful never to rush her moves. Between office rumors, cryptic emails, planted suspicions, and gentle social manipulation, she varied her timing and methods, making it all seem like natural entropy rather than sabotage. She observed every ripple without ever dipping her hands into the stream. No one, not even those closest to her, would ever suspect her involvement. As autumn deepened, the air in Ashbury took on a quiet chill. Halloween decorations sprouted on stoops, and the leaves along Emily's street glowed red and gold. She smiled as neighbors complimented her on their tasteful porch display, her voice pleasant as she asked after their children and weekends. Inside, she tracked each crack forming in Olivia's career and Daniel's composure, her mind forever calculating, always 2 moves ahead. The games had begun. No board, no referee, only secrets, and the chill certainty that comes from being underestimated. Emily moved through her days with a steady grace, outwardly unchanged, inwardly transformed. She would dismantle their lives not with a shout, but a whisper, a quiet, deliberate unraveling, hidden in plain sight. The perfect trap. Emily had learned that to set a truly perfect trap, you had to give the prey just enough room to believe in their own safety. In Ashbury's humming autumn, she orchestrated each step with the precision of a master chess player, never direct, never forceful, but unmistakably inevitable in its design. Olivia, meanwhile, bounced between anxiety and denial. Her once commanding presence was now tinged with nervous energy. Gossip at the agency swirled around her. Clients she'd wooed for years requested other representatives without explanation. Olivia complained to Emily about confusing calendar discrepancies and important files that disappeared from her computer only to reappear minutes before crucial meetings. "It felt," she said over a glass of wine one night, "like the universe was playing games with her." Emily listened, her gaze sympathetic, gently nudging Olivia to elaborate with perfectly timed questions that made the confusion feel even more substantial. Emily had been planting seeds for weeks. The anonymous emails to Olivia's supervisors were always vague but pointed suggestions that Olivia sometimes mishandled confidential material. Rumors about her indiscretion at networking events, vague references to disputes with high-profile clients. These messages were never so specific as to be immediately actionable, but they created clouds of doubt, forcing management to keep Olivia under closer and closer scrutiny. Olivia's digital world grew unpredictable as well. Emily knew from years of friendship just how forgetful Olivia could be about logins and passwords. A lost phone here, an old password scribbled in a notebook there. Emily exploited these lapses not with malice, but with a cold logic that left no trace. Drafts of slightly embarrassing emails would appear in Olivia's outbox and then be deleted before they could be sent, except, somehow, the IT department always received alerts of unusual activity. A file labeled confidential do not forward suddenly ended up in the primary email account of the firm's managing partner. Olivia's explanations sounded defensive and far-fetched. "It's not possible, I never sent that." But the more she insisted, the less convincing she became. Professionally and socially, Emily widened the net. A casual question at a PTA meeting to a mutual acquaintance. Did Olivia ever follow up on that fundraiser sponsorship? She seemed so stressed when I last spoke to her. I hope she's not overloaded, sent little ripples through the parent community, where word of unreliability could do lasting damage. Invitations to local events thinned out. Social media, once Olivia's arena of effortless self-promotion, became perilous. Emily would drop gentle, cryptic comments beneath Olivia's posts, nothing overt. Hope that presentation went as planned. Heard it was a tough crowd. At the same time, Emily was orchestrating more personal, invisible collisions. She accidentally scheduled a girls' night at Olivia's, just as a project deadline at her firm approached, then told Olivia she'd completely forgotten about the conflict. Olivia tried to keep it together, fluttering between charm and frustration, trying to maintain her legendary reputation for juggling chaos with a smile. But the cracks began to show, first with slightly curt responses in group chats, then tense laughter at dinner parties, and finally with tearful late-night calls to Emily. Daniel was not immune to Emily's web, though his unraveling came less from office politics and more from subtle disruptions at home. His favorite jacket disappeared, only to be returned with a lipstick stain on the collar he couldn't remember. Restaurant receipts for dinners he was certain he hadn't attended showed up in the mail, and a neighbor asked innocently, "Wasn't that you I saw at the Masons' table with Olivia last Thursday?" Daniel flatly denied it, but the uncertainty lingered. Emily's restraint was her greatest weapon. She moved with an effortless calm, controlling everything from timing to tone. She never made direct accusations nor revealed what she knew. Instead, she fostered an atmosphere in which Olivia and Daniel could only guess at the source and meaning of their incremental misfortunes. Olivia began keeping a planner gripped tightly, recording every conversation, every email. Her coworkers soon whispered that she was obsessed, unstable, not quite herself. At the office, she snapped at an assistant, and within an hour the story had circulated through 2 departments. Emily's careful, offhand mention at a community brunch. "Olivia's been so tired lately. I hope she's not burning out," reinforced the image of a woman on the edge. Late one evening, Emily found herself alone by the window, watching the golden streetlights cast shifting shadows across her quiet neighborhood. She felt a tug of guilt as she remembered Olivia's panicked voice the night before, swearing something was happening, that someone was out to get her. Emily almost wanted to confess, to step in and offer comfort. But then she remembered the sight of Daniel's hand lingering on Olivia's knee, the secretive laughter that was never meant for her. The cold ache of betrayal returned, reminding her that mercy had no place in the game she had chosen to play. At Olivia's office, things continued to spiral. A major client flagged an error in a marketing campaign, a misstep traced directly to Olivia's oversight. Except Emily knew Olivia never used that graphic, at least not intentionally. The switch had happened on the company's shared server, a change so minor only an attentive eye or a determined adversary would catch it. The fallout was swift. Olivia was called in for another performance review, her record once clean and praised, now spotted with notes on irregularities and lapses in professional judgment. Fear made Olivia reckless. She left voicemails for Emily at all hours, sometimes incoherent, sometimes sobbing, sometimes angry. Emily responded with gentle concern, never pushing her away nor offering too much comfort. Her voice on the phone was soothing, her advice always conservative. "Don't take it so hard, Liv. Maybe it's all just a run of bad luck. Try to rest. You've been through worse." But Emily noticed the ripple effect expanding wider. Olivia's boyfriend left after a public argument at a party. Rumors swirled about stress leave, and Olivia's mother called Emily privately, asking if she knew what was wrong, if anything had happened. Emily maintained her role flawlessly, shaking her head regretfully, and placing her hand gently over Olivia's mother's. "She's just overwhelmed, I think. Work, life, it all piles up, she'll pull through." By Halloween, Olivia skipped gatherings altogether, her absence noticed and then quietly accepted. The effortless confidence that once made her the life of every event had dissolved. In its place was a sense of dread, as if Olivia could sense the invisible leash tightening around her. Emily watched this transformation with conflicted satisfaction, the cold edge of victory tinged with something bittersweet. Setting the perfect trap, Emily realized, was not about direct confrontation or public scenes. It was the art of undermining certainty, of twisting the world quietly until the target did the rest of the undoing themselves. With each step, Olivia was pushed further into a corner, desperate to understand, but still blind to the truth. And through it all, Emily stood just outside reach, her face calm, her motives unreadable even as the trap snapped shut. The first cracks autumn's steady hush settled over Ashbury, the world outside soft and golden, but within Emily's orbit, invisible fractures were widening. She watched the gradual unraveling of the two people who had so thoughtlessly dethroned her trust. Nothing about Emily's exterior changed. She moved among her neighbors with the expected calm, dishing out pumpkin bread at PTA meetings, waving to the dog walkers, exchanging book recommendations at the library. Only Emily knew how hollow the gestures felt, how thoroughly she'd trained herself to inhabit the role of the contented wife and steadfast friend. The first cracks surfaced between Daniel and Olivia. Small, imperceptible at first, an awkward pause during group conversations, a missed inside joke, a suspicion flickering behind Daniel's eyes when Olivia interrupted too quickly. Emily fostered this tension with surgical subtlety. She'd toss out a question seemingly at random. "Wasn't it you who told me that story, Olivia? Or was it Daniel?" Planting seeds of doubt about what had truly transpired between the two. Daniel would laugh it off, a touch too loudly, eyes darting toward Olivia, who would shrug and sip her wine with a feigned nonchalance. But the facade was cracking. Daniel's work life took a sudden, troubling turn. One morning, as he prepared to leave for the office, his phone chimed with a meeting request titled Internal Review. Emily, standing by the coffee maker, feigned a yawn and a smile. "Nothing serious, I hope?" she said lightly. He brushed off her concern, but she saw the twitch of nerves in his jaw. That week, Daniel grew restless, jumping at calendar alerts, slamming drawers, poring over old emails deep into the night. His promotion had stalled. Office whispers grew louder about potential policy violations. Emily watched him come home later and later, exhaustion tugging at his features, edge replacing affection. The distance between husband and wife widened in small ways. Daniel's greetings at the door lost warmth. Their dinner conversations fizzled into silence, and he hesitated before answering even ordinary questions. If Emily sensed blame in his glances, she met it with practiced neutrality and gentle support, never giving him a tangible grievance, always seeming just out of reach emotionally. Meanwhile, Olivia's world became a sinkhole of mounting anxiety. At first, her bad luck had seemed random. A project nearly missed, a file misplaced, small hiccups easily brushed aside. Now, inescapably, things intensified. Olivia snapped at colleagues and second-guessed every email she sent, the bright, brash confidence of months past replaced by a brittle tension. When they met for their usual coffee, Olivia clung to her cup with shaking hands, the persistent clatter betraying her focus. "I keep feeling I'm being watched at work, Em," Olivia whispered, unable to look her friend in the eye. "People are questioning every tiny mistake. HR called me in again. God, what if I really did screw up something major and just forgot?" Emily reached over, squeezed her friend's hand, and reassured her, voice like silk over steel. "Don't let the stress get to you. You've always thrived under pressure. Maybe it's just the busy season." She gave nothing away. The neighborhood's murmur grew stronger, fueled by the little ripples Emily sent through casual conversation. A passing comment at the farmer's market, "Daniel's job sounds so competitive. All those audits and checks," was repeated, repackaged, and returned to her at a change. Parent-teacher conference a week later. Word got around about Olivia's frazzled temperament. Invitations to brunch, once automatic, were quietly rescinded. A local paper ran an innocuous feature about stress in the workplace, quoting an anonymous source warning about PR professionals on the edge. Emily found the clipping minutes after it appeared in her mailbox, careful to feign surprise as Daniel handed it over. Within their dwindling trio, interactions turned sour and strained. Olivia grew paranoid, certain confidences now spoken in urgent, hurried tones. She started arriving late and leaving early, her phone glued to her palm. Daniel, sensing discomfort, retreated. His attempts at carefree banter were rebuffed by Olivia's curt replies. Sometimes Emily would find them in the kitchen, their voices muted, the air charged with discomfort. Upon seeing Emily, they froze into the polite postures of strangers at a dinner party. Emily documented it all: dates, snippets of conversation, even the books left half-read on the coffee table, signs of minds too restless for focus. It was her reassurance. There was no need for overt sabotage anymore. The process was underway, the unraveling self-propelled. Now all she had to do was observe and guide if necessary. As Daniel's internal review dragged on, rumors bubbled among his colleagues. A friend from the logistics firm called Emily one afternoon while Daniel was still at work. "Is Daniel okay? He seems really off." Emily listened with genuine curiosity and assured them. "He's just under a lot of pressure, new management, lots of scrutiny. I'm sure it's nothing important." Her understated tone both discouraged gossip and further cemented Daniel's image as a man under siege. At home, Daniel's behavior turned defensive. He triple-checked his emails, locked his devices with new passwords, was quick to anger if Emily hovered too close to the office door. When she gently inquired, he shut down the conversation with a tight, "It's just work stuff. Don't worry." Emily's silence became her most potent tool. No longer did she need to actively sow discord. Her previous efforts had taken root. She watched the dynamic shift. Daniel began to distrust Olivia. Olivia withdrew from Daniel, and Emily herself was cast by both as the last island of calm. The first cracks, once nearly invisible, were now canyons. Olivia stopped by less frequently, claiming exhaustion. Daniel started spending weekends at the office or in long, purposeful runs, anything to avoid being home, to avoid confronting the questions lurking in the air. The few conversations that did happen between the three of them were laced with subtext, everyone pretending not to hear the echo of suspicion in every word. As the leaves faded to brown, and the first bites of winter nipped at Ashbury's edges, Emily felt an odd sense of peace. The facade of calm had, as she intended, been replaced with fracture lines only she understood fully. The game was no longer about action. Now it was about endurance, patience, and the silent watching, as those who betrayed her unraveled themselves. And so the first cracks widened, slow and quiet, but sure, and Emily waited, serene and composed, knowing there could be no turning back. The price of betrayal. As the first frosts crept over Ashbury's lawns and daylight faded quickly behind gray clouds, the aftershocks of Emily's silent campaign rippled outward in all directions. The cost of betrayal, she realized, was never paid in a single devastating moment. It was a slow draining, a leaching of color and certainty from the lives of those who dared take for granted the steadfastness of her love. Olivia was the first to feel the chill in earnest. Her fall from social grace was both subtle and relentless. Where once she had sparkled at dinner parties and served as an unofficial confidant for neighbors and colleagues alike, now Olivia noticed sidelong glances and quiet, unfinished conversations whenever she entered a room. Once routine brunch invitations faded into silence. Group chats she'd once dominated became slightly colder, replies curt and predictable. At first, Olivia shrugged it off as seasonal blues, but the isolation thickened with every passing week. At the agency, her reputation so meticulously built unraveled day by day. Clients, previously eager for her guidance, began requesting other publicists, citing the need for a fresh perspective. Some canceled meetings with awkwardly worded apologies. The HR department, following up on a trail of anonymous rumors and inexplicable errors, kept Olivia under constant review. Every deadline missed, every slip of the tongue, every piece of lost paperwork deepened the growing suspicion that she was no longer reliable. her confidence wavered. Small social faux pas, once laughed off, now haunted her. At a local fundraising gala, Olivia spilled wine on her dress. A trivial accident, but still felt the ripples of quiet amusement from other committees. The sense of being observed, judged, and found wanting pressed against her with every handshake and forced smile. Her once effervescent personality clouded with doubt and frustration. Home was no refuge. After a heated public spat at a friend's loft the previous week, Olivia's boyfriend had left her, carrying his weekender bag to a waiting Uber without another word. Friends, wary of drama or awkward loyalties, dropped off care packages on her stoop but hesitated to ring the bell or linger. Olivia's mother called more often, her voice thin and concerned, but Olivia could hardly bring herself to answer. Every attempt to reach out to Emily ended with the same gentle, infuriating wall. "You just need rest, Liv. You're under so much pressure." Meanwhile, Daniel's unraveling continued in a different register, a private crisis, buried beneath layers of pride and denial. The internal audit at his firm had taken a darker turn. He was called into a series of tense, closed-door meetings, interrogated about file discrepancies and inappropriate contact with competitors. The evidence was circumstantial, nothing he could point to directly, but the investigation hung over his head like a vulture waiting for a stumble. Daniel's confidence, always his shield, began to crack. He argued with managers, snapped at subordinates, and left meetings flustered and red-faced. Gossip, once a minor annoyance, began to threaten his entire career. He overheard fragments, "Did you hear about Harper's emails?" and "Just keep your head down," circulating like poison in the halls. The promotion he'd once counted on with smug security evaporated, replaced by whispered warnings and the cold bureaucracy of HR procedure. At home, his anxiety transformed into irritability. He grew short-tempered, especially when discussing work. Dinners dwindled into tense silences, forks scraping soundlessly against plates. Daniel avoided Olivia, her voice now mostly confined to apologetic text messages, and retreated from Emily, who remained ever patient, perfectly unreadable. The true price Daniel paid, though, was not just professional. The small, intimate rituals that had once underpinned his marriage movie nights, sprawled on the couch, shared Sunday papers, the spontaneous laughter disappeared, replaced by suspicion and a void he could not fill. Emily's warmth never faltered, but neither did it invite confession. If Daniel sometimes caught her watching him, her gaze calm and distant, he chose to say nothing. There seemed no safe ground left for honesty. Out in the neighborhood, the Harpers' flawless reputation began to erode as well. Stories, scraps of speculation, innocent at first, passed between lawn chairs and carpool lines. "Did you notice Olivia's not around as much?" "I haven't seen Daniel at the club in weeks," Mrs. Terrence, from the next block, whispered to a friend that she thought Emily looked tired, worried, maybe, but she'd never trouble anyone about it. No one accused, but everyone watched. It was a masterpiece of social engineering. Emily's true revenge was never violence or outrage, but the weaponization of ordinary moments. A look, a rumor, a glance held too long, a question dropped in passing. She never needed to shout her betrayal from the rooftops, because she had learned the town itself would do it for her, in hushed voices and knowing silences. If Emily felt triumph, it was muted by the weight of what she'd set in motion. Late at night, she would stand by the living room windows, watching frost gather beneath the porch light as her breath fogged the glass. The town glowed with quiet warmth, children in Halloween costumes, lingering on corners, porch lights twinkling like constellations. But for Emily, the world outside her walls had grown strangely still, as if she were gazing out from the eye of a storm. She listened to voicemails from Olivia and Daniel, emotions squeezed thin and desperate, never returning the calls except with gentle, impenetrable care. She went about her days with the clarity of someone who had already accepted consequence, shopping for groceries, volunteering at the library's holiday drive, hosting her mother-in-law for tea, all while the threads of her masterpiece pulled tighter and tighter around her former life. If anyone had asked, Emily would have said she felt nothing. But of course she did loneliness, curiosity, even pity. Now and then, she ached for the easier friendships and lighter days, but mostly, she ached for justice. And for the first time in a long while she felt she'd finally gotten close. But victory has its price. With Daniel's career in ruins and Olivia nearly a ghost in her old life, Emily was left as the survivor, her own place in the world unchanged at least from the outside. It was the cost of betrayal. Not just in the losses suffered by Daniel and Olivia, but in the sharp, cold isolation that comes from being the architect of their undoing. That winter, as Ashbury huddled against the cold, Emily embraced the silence she had created. The town would move on, gossip would turn to other dramas, but within the walls of her immaculate house, the price of betrayal would echo for a long, long time. Collapse winter swept into Ashbury with a silent finality, turning lawns to muted palettes of gray and white. The town's cheery holiday decorations could not mask the tension thickening inside Emily's once joyous circle. Something had broken. Beneath the rhythm of daily life, a sense of unease reverberated like a tremor waiting for release. Olivia, once the center of every gathering, had shrunk into herself. She spent nights in her dim apartment, curtains drawn, clutching her phone as if it were a lifeline. Her mirror reflected a stranger. Hollow-eyed, anxious, her energy drained by the invisible battle she couldn't name. Professional disaster followed her footsteps. Another client jumped ship, citing communication lapses. Her manager extended another courtesy meeting, words wearily diplomatic but the message clear. Her career was teetering. Even the smallest error bled into catastrophe. Desperate for clarity, Olivia began to reconstruct the chain of her misfortunes. Each hurdle, every misplaced file, each prickly rumor traced back to some seemingly ordinary interaction. The slights and sabotages, once easy to dismiss as bad luck or work stress, now felt directed, purposeful. Her once famous memory, the one that had earned her confidence and trust, turned into her sharpest weapon. She recalled casual questions in meetings repeated by others, the flood of confusion that always followed an innocent conversation, subtle threads looping ever tighter. Again and again, the details pointed back toward Emily. She resisted the thought at first. Emily was her rock, the friend, who had dried her tears and nursed hangovers, who never failed to answer a midnight call. Yet the mounting evidence became impossible to ignore. The comforting words, always a bit too polished. The too calm support, never a demand for details, never an offer of real help. Olivia's mind raced. Had every wine night been research? Every confession ammunition? In the darkest hours of dawn, Olivia scrawled timelines and names and half-remembered whispers, filling journal pages in jagged script. The sense of betrayal frightened her, nearly as much as the unraveling of her world. If Emily, so perfect and dependable, could be the architect of this misery, then nothing was safe. The confrontation was inevitable. It came on a frigid Saturday, after Olivia spent the night in a haze, sleep eluding her despite exhaustion. She turned up at Emily's front porch unannounced, face raw with emotion, voice trembling between hope and accusation. Emily opened the door in her usual composed manner, wrapped in a thick cardigan, eyes shadowed yet steady. For a second, she seemed to hope Olivia might just leave a casserole, or news of an engagement, as she used to. But Olivia stepped inside with barely a word, brushing past her, the charge of confrontation hanging in the air like static. In the living room, they faced each other across the comfort of old armchairs and decorative cushions. Olivia's hands twisted nervously. Emily watched, arms folded, every inch of her calculated restraint on display. "You know why I'm here, don't you?" Olivia's voice was low, almost pleading. Emily waited. Her face was unreadable, a portrait of practiced empathy. Olivia continued, "Things started falling apart, and you were always there. Not just present, you were perfectly placed. And now, everywhere I look, there are footprints I can't ignore. My clients disappearing, the stories spreading, files going missing. Even Daniel, he's different. You're the only one who's never changed." A silence expanded between them, pressed tight by years of trust and affection. For a moment, Emily looked down, tracing the wood grain beneath her slippered feet. When she looked up, her eyes were cool, as if weighing whether to deny or to disclose. "I see," Emily said at last, her words slow and careful. "And what do you think I've done?" Olivia's composure fractured. "I think you decided to punish us. I don't know for what, maybe for what happened, maybe for something I didn't see. But I know you, Em. I know how quiet you get when you're angry. How you make it sound like you're taking care of people when you're really setting the ground beneath them on fire." Emily studied her, emotion coiling beneath the surface, a flicker of sympathy, or perhaps satisfaction at being so accurately understood. "Maybe you should ask Daniel about the real reason things went wrong," she offered, her voice soft, but the statement was pierced with ice. The name made Olivia wince, summoning memories of furtive glances, the electric current of secrecy, the guilt she'd tried to ignore. "This isn't about Daniel and me," she murmured, defensiveness and remorse twisting together. Emily's lips curved, not a smile but a sad, knowing line. "You both made your choices. I made mine." Olivia's anger surged, a desperate flare. "Then what, Em? Was this all revenge? You wanted to ruin us, destroy everything because of one stupid mistake?" For an instant, Emily's mask slipped. Hurt flashed in her eyes, mingled with weariness. She exhaled, gathering her resolve into something sharp. "No one is ever destroyed all at once," she said. "The world chips away at people. You chipped away at me. I simply stopped patching the cracks for you." The confession, part admission, part condemnation landed between them, heavy as snowfall. Olivia felt deflated. She knew there would be no dramatic apology, no return to their old alliance. The Emily she'd loved, the foundation of her post-college adulthood, had been replaced with a judge she could never sway. The confrontation ended not with shouting, but with a tired, broken silence. Olivia left, letting the door close quietly behind her. The street outside was barren, lined with dormant hedges and houses glowing with early dusk. She stared out, feeling both exposed and free, at last understanding the shape of her loss. Back inside, Emily lingered in the living room, her breathing measured but shallow. Part of her had longed for the chance to explain or justify, to lay out every detail and be seen as more than a villain. But in the end, she'd let the truth stand bare. She had never wanted chaos. She'd simply stopped cleaning up other people's messes. Elsewhere, Daniel sensed the turbulence but lacked the courage to face it directly. He watched Olivia's number flash on his phone, ignored her desperate texts, and came home later than ever, the pressure at work now the least of his torments. He found Emily tending the fire, her eyes reflective and still. The only words spoken were about groceries, the weather, plans for the following week. The collapse was complete. The trio was undone not by any violent revelation, but by the patient engineering of cracks that could no longer be bridged. Trust had evaporated, and with it, the comfort of old loyalties. Snow began to fall outside, quiet and implacable, obscuring the paths Emily, Olivia, and Daniel had once walked together. Each was alone now, left to reckon with the shape of their heartbreak. Inside her silent house, Emily looked out at the settling dusk and felt both hollow and strangely at peace. Collapse, she realized, was not ruin, it was simply the end of pretending. Revelation Ashbury wore a frozen hush when the truth finally surfaced, heavy white on tree branches, the hush of a world holding its breath. The storm had passed, and in its wake laid a silence more profound and honest than before, raw spaces claimed by hard truths and severed ties. Days bled together after Olivia's confrontation with Emily, but for Olivia, sleep was a thing of the past. Her mind replayed the meeting in agonizing loops, combing over Emily's words and the emotions simmering underneath her practiced calm. After years of friendship, she now recognized the chill behind Emily's patience, a resolve and calculation that left no skirmish visible, only the results. Rumors of Olivia's breakdown and Daniel's professional troubles drifted through Ashbury's social strata, mutating with every telling. With Emily's designs having shattered the facade, all that remained for the trio was exposure. Olivia, stripped of the comfort of denial, could only look backward at every secret she'd shared, every careless laugh, every late night when desire and guilt blurred into one. She retraced her steps with a desperation that bordered on obsession. For the first time, she understood the full reach of Emily's vengeance. It wasn't just a campaign of whispers or sabotage, but a maze she'd unwittingly wandered, guided by a hand she'd always trusted, blind to her own complicity. Still, Olivia retained enough grasp to try for closure. She began organizing her thoughts, filling page after page with apologies and explanations that never quite found their target. She considered confessing fully to Daniel, unburdening herself of the guilt, but the words caught in her throat, heavy and sour. Instead, the next revelation unfolded not from Olivia, but from Daniel, whose life had contracted to a series of routines designed to keep him moving, to avoid reflection. He no longer lingered in the house. Every glance at Emily was brief, searching for warmth and finding only the distant light of someone finished with hope. Work, now a battlefield of damage control and humiliation, left him raw and short-tempered. He distracted himself with late-night runs, pounding his frustration into the icy pavement, but to no avail. As days passed, subtle details began clicking into place. The neighbor's innocent question about his dinner with Olivia, receipts he never remembered paying for, a faint scent of Olivia's perfume that clung to his jacket after evenings she'd left the house earlier. Daniel tried to rationalize them all, and for months he had, but now he saw the pattern, as if a mask had been stripped from the world. The real punch came through the rumor mill at work. An offhand comment about anonymous emails, someone investigating connections, a rumor that the source was close to home. Faced with his own mounting failures, Daniel's carefully compartmentalized memory began to fall apart. The tension between him and Olivia grew unbearable, until he messaged her under the pretense of needing to talk about everything. The unspoken understanding in the message was thick. It wasn't about work, or even personal survival, it was about the truth. They met in a parking lot on the edge of town, wind howling around them under the wide gray sky. Olivia looked haggard, Daniel older than his 36 years. Both circled the subject for a moment, then Olivia broke down and admitted what Emily had accused, her voice cracking with remorse. She spoke of the affair, of secrecy and fear, of how she thought Emily would never notice, and how those months had been a blur of adrenaline and guilt. Daniel listened in silence. Hearing it from Olivia, confirmation at last was both devastating and, in a twisted way, cleansing. "Emily knew," he said softly, and Olivia nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. For a long while, they sat together, neither entirely angry nor forgiving. They were, in that bleak December night, simply two people without illusions, sharing the burden of having destroyed something precious. Afterward, Daniel couldn't bring himself to return home immediately. He drove instead through the sleeping streets, winding past houses, wreathed in holiday lights. He remembered building their home together, painting the nursery before that loss they never dared name. The quiet happiness that for a time seemed set in stone. It was all gone now, stripped bare. Emily, meanwhile, sensed the shift. She'd braced herself for confrontation, the possibility of Daniel finally realizing, asking, demanding, but what came instead was a still, almost solemn acceptance. There was no heated fight, no pleas for forgiveness. Instead, Daniel returned home one evening, stood in the kitchen as Emily folded laundry, and quietly uttered, "I know about everything. I know you saw us. And I know what you did." She faced him, folding a towel with meticulous precision. "Then there's nothing left to discuss, is there?" Her voice was neither angry nor cold, it was weary, gentle, even merciful in its finality. Daniel nodded. For the first time, he met Emily's gaze and saw the steel beneath. Any hope of reconciliation faded in that moment, replaced by the knowledge that this was the new world they had built, a world structured by disappointment and autonomy, where everyone bore their wounds in silence. Word filtered through Ashbury that the Harpers were keeping to themselves that winter. Olivia stopped appearing at any public events and quietly handed in her resignation at the PR agency. Daniel's future at the logistics firm would be determined after the holidays, but it hardly seemed to matter anymore. Emily's outward routines remained unchanged: volunteering, baking, responding to holiday cards. But the air around her shifted calmer, yes, but also remote, as if she'd stepped onto a separate plane. What surprised the town wasn't the scandal itself, but how quietly it all unraveled. The devastation, after all, did not come from spectacle but from truth laid bare, the deep silences that follow an irrevocable confession. In the solitude that settled over Ashbury, each of them, Emily, Olivia, Daniel, faced the reality of what had been lost. For Emily, it was the end of illusion, and perhaps the beginning of something more honest, albeit painfully so. She had not sought destruction, only the certainty that no one would mistake her silence for weakness again. The cost, she recognized, was permanent. In the end, it wasn't exposure that undid them, but the knowledge that beneath their careful lives, the truth had always been waiting, hidden in plain sight. And in the final reckoning, no one emerged unscathed. Calm after the storm. For weeks after everything collapsed, Ashbury seemed to draw a quiet breath. The ice melted, sidewalks reappeared from beneath winter's gray crust, and a tentative warmth began to creep through the town. There were no more whispers attached to Emily Harper's name, at least not loud enough to disturb her. In the wake of scandal and heartbreak, silence settled, and from silence, a different kind of peace tried to grow. Emily moved through her home like someone rediscovering an old skin. For the first time in months, she no longer felt compelled to monitor Daniel's every gesture or brace for Olivia's laughter from the next room. The kitchen was hers alone now, a place for small routines rather than deceptions. There was no reason to scheme, no secrets left to crack open. The air inside felt lighter, as though the burden of untold things had lifted, but the quiet weighed against her at times, exposing a loneliness she hadn't anticipated. Daniel remained in the house, for now. They treated each other as polite housemates, each respecting invisible boundaries. The conversations between them were brief and transactional. Did you fix the leaky faucet? Could you pick up milk? The easy warmth that had once filled their marriage was gone, replaced by careful neutrality. Daniel spent Saturdays at the golf course or at a friend's house, returning late and apologizing for nothing. Emily didn't resent his distance. If anything, she felt relief. Their marriage was now only a remnant: shared bills, a divided yard, and a mutual understanding that the real story was over. Emily had not heard from Olivia since that last, shattering conversation. Olivia's phone had been disconnected. Rumor had it she'd left Ashbury altogether, heading to stay with family in another state. Occasionally, Emily would spot Olivia's mother pulling weeds in the front yard or clearing out the last boxes, reminders of the life they'd once wound together, now packed away. There was no bitterness left, just a worn-out sorrow and a faint gratitude for closure. As the days lengthened and Ashbury shook off its wintry gloom, Emily allowed herself new habits. She took up gardening, turning the backyard's neglected corners into islands of green. On Sundays, she visited the local farmers' market, folding basil and tomatoes into her basket, bantering gently with the vendors. She joined a yoga class at the community center, something she'd always put off while juggling other people's needs. There, on the mat, as light filtered through tall windows and bodies moved in silent harmony, she rediscovered a rhythm that belonged to her alone. Neighbors resumed their lives too. In Ashbury, scandal was always a season, never a destiny. People nodded to Emily on her morning walks, commented on the daffodils or the weather, and soon their conversations returned to school fundraisers or soccer tournaments. Emily was included out of habit at first, then by genuine acceptance, her presence too constant, her composure too grounded to invite further speculation. Trust in Ashbury was slow to rebuild, but it did, in small invitations. A cookout, a book club, a request for advice on rose pruners. Yet peace did not mean absence of memory. Sometimes, as Emily folded laundry or wiped down the kitchen counter, a wave of recollection swept over her. Olivia's laughter echoing on the patio, Daniel's hand at the small of her back, the cold determination that had carried her through each step of her quiet scheme. These memories did not sting so much as hollow her, leaving a vague ache for the life that had seemed possible once. What surprised Emily most was her lack of triumph. The revenge she had orchestrated, with all its patient layers, had achieved its aim. She was no longer underestimated, no longer the woman others assumed would quietly bear betrayal. But standing now in the ruins, calm, responsible, even respected, she recognized how little it truly mattered. There was no elation in outsmarting those she had loved, only the realization that justice, once served, had no warmth to offer. There were unexpected moments of grace. One Saturday in late spring, Emily volunteered at the local animal shelter. The simple act of holding a trembling dog, of comforting another living thing desperate for trust, reminded her that compassion wasn't weakness. It was a choice, one she could slowly reclaim, even for herself. She learned to speak gently again, to laugh when the moment allowed, to let silence fall without dread. Daniel eventually broached the question of their future. It came on a quiet evening, as they sat on opposite ends of the living room couch, the television quietly murmuring nonsense between them. "Emily," he said, voice soft, "do you want to make this work, or are we just prolonging what's inevitable?" She didn't respond right away. For the first time, she regarded him not with calculation or resentment, but with open, unhurried clarity. "I think we both know the answer," she replied. "And I think we'll both be okay." There would be papers to sign, logistics to manage, difficult conversations with family. But there was also a sense of honesty, the first in a long while, moving between them. They agreed to wait until summer to decide, to let the season do its gentle work on their hearts. By June, Emily found herself enjoying pockets of true solitude, hiking along Ashbury's lakeside trail, losing herself in novels on the deck, planting wildflowers. Each small act felt like a quiet rebuilding, not of the house she lived in, but of the self she'd almost lost. Occasionally, she mailed a letter to her mother, or called an old friend from college. Each connection, even tentative, anchored her toward a future where trust might still have a place. One night, rain pattering softly against the bedroom window, Emily admitted in her journal that she did not regret what she had done. She mourned what had been lost, the trio's laughter, her marriage's trust, the comfort of certainty, but she recognized, too, the gift hidden inside the calm. The storm had taught her the power of boundaries, of surviving heartbreak, of living fiercely honest. Perhaps, she thought, that was enough. As the sky over Ashbury turned lavender with summer dawns, Emily walked each morning through the lanes she knew so well. She moved unobtrusively, her shadow long against budding lawns, finally at peace with the world, both outside and within. Her story, once knotted by secrecy and vengeance, was open now, its end unwritten but, at last, belonging only to her.